Bear down, Chicago, because what you are about to hear is absolutely not your average off-season filler story. This is a deep, raw confession, straight from the mouth of our franchise quarterback himself. And buried inside that confession is a massive warning shot aimed directly at every single team in the NFC. Caleb Williams just told the world something that no Bears fan really wanted to hear out loud, but if we are being completely honest with ourselves, it is something we already knew deep down in our gut. And here is the wildest part of it all. The most electric thing about this confession isn't even the vulnerability behind it. It is what that vulnerability is quietly telling us about the absolute ceiling of this football team heading into the 2026 season. Stick with me on this, because by the time we get to the end of this documentary, you are going to understand exactly why some people inside Hollis Hall are genuinely terrified of what version of Caleb Williams is about to show up this fall. And look, that is not the only fire burning in Chicago right now. There is a 4-year veteran defensive back walking into training camp fighting for his absolute football life, while general manager Ryan Poles already has a cheaper, younger answer waiting right there in the wings. On top of that, we have a rookie receiver the entire city has fallen completely in love with after just a few practices in shorts. But a 30-year veteran beat reporter just published the most uncomfortable, glaring gut check of the entire offseason. We are getting into all of it today. Buckle up. Let us start right with the headline. Caleb Williams sat down with reporters this offseason and dropped a line that honestly should be tattooed somewhere inside the Bears practice facility. He said that last year, he felt like he was drowning, trying to breathe, trying to stay alive, just waiting for a boat to come around. Those are his exact words, not some media pundit's wild exaggeration. He said it directly to his running backs coach, Eric Stoodsville, and it became public through NBC Sports. But then he added something even more critical. He said this year is a completely different feeling. He believes the Bears can pick up exactly where they left off last season because the terminology, the play calls, the complex verbiage of Ben Johnson's offense, all of it is already completely fluent for him in the middle of June. It is not something he has to desperately piece together in October. It is not something he is still trying to translate in his head during a high-stress 2-minute drill in December. He is fluent right now, before training camp has even kicked off. Now, this is where I need you to slow down with me, because there are two very different ways people are reading into this, and one of them is dead wrong. The wrong read is that this proves Williams was in major trouble last year, that he still has a mountain to climb, or that this is somehow a confession of failure. Forget that narrative immediately. Just throw it out. Because look at what actually happened around that drowning feeling. The Chicago Bears, with a rookie quarterback who privately described himself as gasping for air, won the NFC North, won a playoff game, and went all the way to the NFC Championship game. We were just 2 wins away from the Super Bowl. Does that sound like a quarterback who was sinking to you? Or does that sound like a guy who was operating under the heaviest possible mental load in year 1 of one of the most complex offensive systems in professional football, playing against NFL speed that has absolutely nothing in common with college football, and still dragged this team to the Final Four? To me, that is not a red flag at all. That is a flashing neon electric green light. Let us actually get into the football science behind why this matters so much. There is a real concept here that doesn't get explained honestly very often in sports media. It is the profound difference between conscious processing and automatic processing. Picture a quarterback in year 1 of a brand new system, especially a demanding one like the system Ben Johnson runs. On every single snap, there are 2 heavy layers of intense mental work fighting for the exact same real estate in his brain. All while a vicious defense is trying to detonate the entire play in under 3 seconds. Layer 1 is reading the actual defense in front of him. Is it man coverage? Is it zone? Is there a disguised blitz coming? Is a safety about to rotate down hard into the box? Then you have layer 2, which is remembering the playbook itself. What is the primary read on this exact look? What is the check down? Where is the hot route? In year 1, both of those layers require fully conscious processing. The quarterback is actively, deliberately thinking through both of them at the exact same time while the clock in his head is screaming. That is exactly the suffocating mental state Caleb Williams was describing when he said he felt like he was drowning. He wasn't describing a player who couldn't hack it in the league. He was describing, almost perfectly, the inner experience of a gifted young quarterback grinding through conscious processing in year one of a brutally complex system. And yet, that overwhelmed version of him still got the Bears to the NFC Championship game. Now, let us pause right here for a brief moment. We put an incredible amount of hard work, sleepless nights, and deep dedication into producing these documentaries for you. We want to build the ultimate community for Bears fans, and every single subscription is a massive wave of motivation for us to keep pushing forward. If you are feeling this breakdown, please take a quick second to smash that subscribe button, hit the like button, share this video with your fellow Bears fans, and leave a comment below. It truly helps grow our community here at Chicago Bears Voice, and we appreciate every single one of you more than you know. Now, let us fast forward to year 2 with that exact same offensive coordinator, the same terminology, and the same verbiage already deeply loaded into Caleb's memory. That second layer, the playbook layer, finally starts to become automatic. The quarterback completely stops consciously recalling what the play call means. He has internalized it so deeply that he simply reacts. And once that switch flips, every single ounce of mental bandwidth that used to be split between two giant jobs now goes entirely toward just one single job, reading the defense in real time. The result of that shift is faster decisions, earlier release points, vastly better composure under pressure, and way more options recognized in significantly less time. That is precisely the transition Caleb Williams just described in his own words. If you are a Bears fan, that reality should make your spine tingle. Because if this team got all the way to the NFC Championship with a year 1, consciously processing Caleb Williams, the real question, the one that should be keeping opposing defensive coordinators up at night, is this: what does this offense look like with a year 2 automatic processing Caleb Williams? There is something else here that deserves way more attention than it is currently getting, and it has absolutely nothing to do with schemes or X's and O's. It has everything to do with who Caleb Williams is as a human being and a leader. Nobody forced this confession out of him. No reporter cornered him in a dark room and demanded to know if he felt overwhelmed last season. He volunteered this information entirely on his own, in a setting where the easy, safe, expected answer would have been generic talk about confidence, hard work, and good vibes. Instead, Williams chose to be highly specific about a real limitation in his own game, and completely precise about exactly what has changed since then. That is not weakness. That is extreme maturity. That is the kind of profound self-awareness that most 20-something athletes in any sport never develop, let alone broadcast publicly to the entire world. Quarterbacks who can be that brutally honest with themselves tend to be the exact ones who keep climbing higher year after year. Because they aren't busy protecting a fragile ego, they are busy fixing the actual problem. Now, to be completely fair, there is a legitimate counterpoint here, and we should absolutely give it its due weight. Some Bears beat reporters have correctly pointed out that Williams' production really took off in the second half of last season, specifically in the third and fourth quarters of games compared to a much rockier start over the first 7 weeks. That is true, and it is absolutely worth acknowledging. But here's the thing. Any offense adjusting in real time during a first season together is going to look exactly like that. The fact that Williams was still accelerating in the second half of the year, even as opposing defensive coordinators had stacked up 8 extra weeks of Ben Johnson film to prepare for him, says just as much about his elite ability to adapt on the fly as anything else does. If anything, that late-season surge under increasing defensive pressure is the strongest evidence yet that year 2 is going to be something truly special. Here is the ultimate bottom line on Caleb Williams. If there is one thing this franchise absolutely needed heading into training camp, it is confirmation that their franchise quarterback is not stuck in some kind of mental rebuilding phase. We needed to know that the system no longer overwhelms him, and that the massive leap from year 1 to year 2 is actually happening in real time, not just in theory. Williams just handed that confirmation to the entire football world in his own words, completely unprompted. That might be the single most important piece of news the Bears have produced all June. And a lot of people out there are sleeping on exactly how massive it is. Now, let us pivot, because there is a second major storyline simmering at Hollis Hall, and it involves a player who has quietly become one of the most fascinating high-stakes contract situations on the entire roster: cornerback Kyler Gordon. Let us be completely straight about something this fanbase does not love to fully process. Gordon is in a far more fragile position than most people want to admit, and it has absolutely nothing to do with his raw talent. It has everything to do with the brutal, unforgiving reality of modern NFL roster building. Talent without availability eventually stops carrying value. No matter how electric the flashes on tape are, look at the actual numbers. 3 games missed as a rookie, 4 missed in year 2. 2 missed in 2024, and then in 2025, the very year Ben Johnson arrived at Halas Hall with sky-high expectations, the exact year the organization desperately wanted Gordon to fully establish himself as one of the premier slot corners in the entire NFC. Kyler Gordon played in just 2 games, 2 out of 17. But here is the detail that matters even more than the missed games count: how Ben Johnson actually talked about those injuries behind the scenes. Because Johnson was not consistent in how he discussed his banged-up players. With receiver Rome Odunze, who also fought through major health issues in 2025. Johnson publicly praised his fierce competitive mentality, highlighting his willingness to push through pain and get back on the field for his teammates. But with Gordon, multiple reports leaking out of Hollis Hall painted a very different, much colder picture. Johnson reportedly expressed a strong desire to see Gordon display more of that same fighting mentality, to push through discomfort more often. Now, before anyone runs wild with the surface-level read on that, assuming Johnson is questioning Gordon's toughness or accusing him of dodging pain, slow down. Because there is a much more accurate professional interpretation here. Ben Johnson isn't just grading players on raw talent. He is grading them on whether they can remain available under the brutal, weekly grind of an NFL season. His offensive system heavily depends on a defense that is actually on the field consistently enough to sustain the kind of sharp rhythm and tempo he wants to play with. A starting cornerback who is active for only 2 games out of 17 isn't just a medical concern anymore. It is a roster construction problem. It is a salary cap problem. And General Manager Ryan Poles is already quietly responding to exactly that problem. Look closely at the draft. The selection of cornerback Malik Muhammad in this year's draft class was not some random best available value pick. Muhammad played primarily outside corner in college. And yes, the transition into an NFL slot role takes real development time, but the simple fact that the Bears used a meaningful, high-value draft pick on a corner in a year when Kyler Gordon was already sitting on the roster sends a signal that does not require much decoding at all. Here is the most honest way to lay out how this likely plays out from here. Scenario 1. Gordon enters 2026 as the starting slot corner with the roster as it is currently constructed. Scenario 2. If Gordon can stay healthy for a full season and perform anywhere close to his 2023 form, when he allowed one of the lowest passer ratings of any cornerback in the entire league when targeted and graded out in the elite range by advanced metrics, the Bears will almost certainly keep him long-term. But then there is Scenario 3. If Gordon suffers another significant injury setback, Malik Muhammad will accelerate rapidly up the depth chart, and Gordon will head into the following offseason with absolutely no guaranteed money left on his deal and a cap number that becomes incredibly easy to move off of. The savings for the front office would be immediate and substantial. And on a roster that is actively trying to fund massive extensions for its young core, that kind of financial flexibility is far too valuable for Poles to ignore. To be completely fair to Gordon here, the criticism is never about his ceiling. Nobody is questioning whether he can be an elite, game-changing cornerback in this defense when he is healthy. The real question, after 4 years of an escalating injury pattern that peaked at 14 missed games during the most important season this franchise has had in over a decade, is whether his body can physically hold up for a full 17-game slate. Nobody knows that answer yet. And that heavy cloud of uncertainty is exactly why the front office already has a contingency plan loaded, locked, and ready to go. To be absolutely clear, the ultimate hope here is that Gordon stays fully healthy all year, lights up the field, and this entire conversation about Muhammad becomes a complete non-issue by October. That is what every single person in Chicago wants to see happen. But what fans want and what a professional front office has to plan for are two completely different things. What Ryan Poles is doing right now makes complete logical sense from a roster management standpoint. Now, let us get to the explosive storyline that is currently splitting Bears Twitter right down the middle: rookie receiver Xavier Thomas. This is the one where I genuinely have the most nuanced take, because the heated debate happening publicly around Thomas says a lot about how off-season football coverage actually works, and how incredibly easy it is to get whiplash from two completely opposite narratives in the exact same week. On one side of the coin, you have reporting featuring direct, glowing comments from Ben Johnson about Thomas heading into minicamp. Johnson said Thomas tends to make a massive play every single day on the practice field, and that if the team can harness all of that raw energy, get him aligned correctly, and get him running routes exactly the way the system demands, he could turn into a legitimate, terrifying weapon this season. Caleb Williams himself even chimed in, saying Thomas's hands are much better than expected for a guy with that kind of blazing speed, that he has already made some incredibly difficult contested catches, and that he clearly cares deeply about putting in the work. But on the completely opposite side of this debate, you have a veteran Bears beat writer, someone who has covered this franchise as a full-time beat reporter since the 1990s, publishing the exact opposite argument. And his point is deeply uncomfortable, but it is absolutely not something we can just dismiss. He points out that the single biggest highlight play everyone keeps replaying on a loop from Thomas in minicamp: a long, beautiful catch off a deep Caleb Williams throw. Happened in a 7-on-7 drill, not a real full squad scrimmage. And on that specific play, the cornerback covering Thomas appeared to think he had safety help over the top, released his coverage early, and only realized after the fact that there was no safety on that side of the field at all. In other words, that explosive play wasn't really about Thomas torching anyone with elite speed or flawless route running. It was a simple defensive miscommunication that handed him a wide-open lane. And then, this veteran reporter does something even sharper. He pulls up a nearly identical scene from years earlier, when a completely different offensive coordinator said almost word for word the exact same things about a different third-round Bears receiver with 4.3 speed and big play potential during that player's rookie minicamp. We all know exactly how that story ended for the Bears. I don't even need to say his name out loud for longtime fans to feel that sudden gut punch of recognition. So, who is actually right here? Is it the optimist hyping Thomas up to be the next big thing, or is it the grizzled skeptic slamming on the brakes? My honest take? They are both completely right, just about different things. The skeptical read is entirely correct that the media hype machine around Thomas after a mere handful of OTA and minicamp reps is wildly disproportionate to what has actually been proven on a real football field. Practices in shorts and helmets with absolutely no live contact have never been, and will never be, a reliable way to evaluate a receiver's true NFL readiness. Chicago's own painful draft history gives fans every single reason to be extremely cautious about getting too attached to a third-round rookie who makes a few pretty catches in May and June. But the skeptical take is also being a little bit unfair in one specific way. Xavier Thomas isn't just some random fast guy nobody had ever heard of before draft weekend. He ran an officially timed 4.28 in the 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. That is blazing, elite speed, even by professional football standards. His college drop rate sat right around 4.7%, which is exceptionally low for a receiver with that kind of deep speed profile. And critically, raw speed is not something that mysteriously disappears the moment a player steps onto an NFL practice field. Speed transfers. What does not automatically transfer, however, is route running precision, reading coverages on the fly, and building real chemistry and timing with a quarterback. That is exactly what Ben Johnson is pointing toward with his very carefully worded, conditional praise. And that exact wording really does matter here. Listen again to the actual structure of what Johnson said. He said if they can harness his energy, and if he can align correctly, and if he can run routes the way the system needs, then he could become a real weapon. That is a coach being conditionally optimistic, not unconditionally optimistic. There is a massive, meaningful difference there. Coaches at this elite level choose their words with absolute precision. Neither Ben Johnson nor Ryan Poles is ever going to hand out unconditional praise to a third-round rookie who still has an entire training camp left to prove himself on a real football field, against real contact and against starting-caliber NFL defenders who are trying to take his head off. What Thomas has to show between now and Week 1 is highly specific and measurable. He has to prove he can run the full, comprehensive route tree this system demands, not just blow past people on simple go routes. In Ben Johnson's offense, receivers are not single-purpose deep threats who just line up in one spot and sprint vertically all game long. They have to run complex intermediate routes, sharp breaking routes, and option routes underneath, all of which require elite body control, technical route stems, and a deep understanding of leverage against different coverages. If Thomas can only run straight-line speed routes and fails to operate underneath against real coverage, NFL defensive coordinators will simply shut him down on shorter downs and assign a fast corner with safety help to erase him in open space on third down. But if Thomas can show during training camp that he can run even a partial route tree while still threatening defenses vertically with that terrifying speed, then his value to this offense becomes very real, very fast. Just picture the absolute dilemma he creates for opposing defensive coordinators when he is lined up alongside Rome Odunze and Luther Burden. If the safety stays glued over the top of Thomas to take away the deep touchdown shot, Odunze suddenly has massive amounts of room to work intermediate routes. If the safety shades heavily toward Odunze instead, Thomas has the entire vertical lane completely to himself. That doesn't require Thomas to become the best receiver on this roster. It only requires him to be consistently threatening enough that opposing defenses have to account for his speed every single week. So, here is my actual conclusion on Xavier Thomas. The skeptic is entirely right to push back against unchecked, wild off-season hype. The optimists are also right that there is a legitimate, undeniable talent base underneath all of it. And Ben Johnson, as usual, has landed on the most precisely calibrated read of all, conditional potential that can absolutely become a dangerous weapon if the hard work from September through December actually matches what we are seeing right now in May and June. When you step back and look at the big picture, this is where all three of these powerful storylines collide. This is what makes this Chicago Bears team genuinely fascinating heading into the 2026 season. And it is not in some forced, manufactured media way. It is real. You have a franchise quarterback who just publicly admitted he felt like he was drowning a year ago, and yet he still led this team all the way to the NFC Championship game while he was drowning. You have a 4-year veteran defensive back whose entire future with the franchise now hinges on something nobody can fully control, staying healthy for an entire season. You have an explosive rookie receiver splitting the fan base right down the middle between legitimate excitement and well-earned skepticism. And you have a coaching staff that walked into Hollis Hall and somehow got this roster just 2 wins away from the Super Bowl, now entering year 2 with a quarterback who already speaks the language of the offense fluently before training camp has even started. History tells us something incredibly important about elite quarterbacks who go through exactly this kind of career trajectory. Josh Allen went through it in Buffalo. Patrick Mahomes went through it in Kansas City. Aaron Rodgers went through it in Green Bay. A rough, mentally overwhelming rookie stretch followed by real continuity with the exact same system and the same coordinator, which immediately translates into an explosive, MVP-caliber leap forward. Why exactly should Chicago be the exception to that historical pattern with Caleb Williams in 2026? The pieces are lining up perfectly. The quarterback is speaking the system fluently. The coaching staff already proved they can win at an elite level. And now, everyone in the building gets to find out what year 2 actually looks like when the training wheels are completely off. Before we wrap up this documentary, I want to remind you again that we put an immense amount of hard work, deep research, and dedication into creating content like this for our community. Every single new subscription serves as an incredible motivation for us to keep grinding and delivering the truth about our beloved team. So, do me a huge favor right now. Smash that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Chicago Bears Voice so you never miss a single deep dive as training camp completely ramps up. I genuinely want to know where you stand on all of this. Are you fully on the hype train with Xavier Thomas, or are you siding with the veteran skeptics on his true impact? Let me know in the comments below, because I read every single one of them. Bear down, Chicago. This season is about to get incredibly loud.